It was a new year, and that meant change for Larry and his friends. First off, Ray was no longer road foreman of engines. He was still going to work for the railroad. He was going to be the manager of the track crew, coordinating railroad repairs. They got a new road foreman of engines named Dave that worked with Larry years ago on a different railroad. While many of the managers there thought Larry was useless and worth more scrap, Dave saw something in him. He had Larry sent for repairs, where they fixed his rough riding and his poor steaming. When Dave came to Southern United Railroad, he was very proud to see that Larry was now a well-respected freight and passenger engine. The railroad itself was getting so busy that Mr. Egan had to build an overflow route for freight trains and was making plans to bring in a couple of new engines. Since the engines were so busy with the main line and all the major branches, they didn't have time to service two smaller branches and the switching at the oil refinery. So Mr. Egan decided to contract out those two branch lines to another railroad to operate. One morning, Larry was returning to South Plainsville as a caboose hopper. When he passed through Denville, he saw Mr. McCormick on the platform. "Good morning, sir," called Larry. "You look very smart. Where are you going?" "I'm going to have a meeting with Mr. Egan about operating those two branch lines in the oil refinery." "Are you going to convert them to narrow gauge, sir?" asked Larry. "No," laughed Mr. McCormick, "but I would need another standard gauge engine to run them." "Can you take me to South Plainsville, please?" "Yes, sir," replied Larry. Mr. McCormick boarded the caboose and they set off. When they arrived, Mr. McCormick said goodbye and thank you to Larry and walked into Mr. Egan's office. As Mr. McCormick walked up, he saw Mr. Egan sitting at his desk across from another well-dressed man. He knocked on the door. "Oh, good morning, Mike," said Mr. Egan. "Come in, have a seat." Mr. McCormick sat down next to the other well-dressed man. "Mike, this is Claudius Warnock, the manager of the Sussex River Railroad. Claudius, this is Michael McCormick, manager of the Denville and Western Narrow Gauge Railroad." The two men shook hands. "Now," began Mr. Egan, "you both put up bids to run these two branch lines I have up for grabs and the oil refinery. I've given it a lot of thought and figured you two can both run the branches for a while, and whoever does the best will win the bid." "That sounds good," said Mr. McCormick. He shook Mr. Warnock's hand again. "May the better railroad win," he said. "I intend to," said Mr. Warnock smugly. Mr. McCormick only owned two standard gauge engines, and he decided rather than take Benny off of yard duty, he would bring Sampson down from the quarry. "Now, Sampson, I'm counting on you to win this bid for us. Please work efficiently as you can." "Yes, sir," said Sampson with spirit. "I will not let you down." So for the next couple of days, Sampson worked alongside Mr. Warnock's engines, competing for the contract for the branch lines. Both did pretty well, but Mr. Warnock was determined to win the contracts by any means necessary. One night, he met with his engines in an old yard. "I can't let McCormick win these contracts," said Mr. Warnock as he paced back and forth. "Don't worry," said one of the diesels, whose name was Damion. "We won't let that happen. Right, Harley?" "He's right, sir. We're just waiting for the perfect time to strike." "Good, very good," Mr. Warnock smiled. The next day, Zack pulled into Lake Junction with Mr. G, where Sampson, Damion, and Harley were all working. He dropped off Mr. G in the business car and then went away to Harley. Sampson was about to push 6 ballast cars when Damion rolled alongside him. "Hello, Sampson." "Oh, hello, Damion," Sampson replied. "I just wanted to tell you that You're doing great work. Oh, thank you, smiled Sampson. So are you and Harley. It's anyone's game. While Damion had Sampson distracted, Harley's driver walked over to the train. He took out a knife and cut the brake hose between the first and second hopper. When he got back to Harley, he blew his horn. That was Damion's signal to move back. Well, I'm gonna let you get back to work. And Damion backed away. Sampson proceeded forward, but when he tried to stop, the heavy cars kept pulling him on. What's happening? Sampson cried. They were headed straight for Mr. G's business car. Oh no! Shouted the driver. He quickly threw Sampson into reverse. But it was too late. Sampson wasn't shocked at what had just happened, while Damion and Harley smiled to themselves. Mr. G and Mr. McCormick heard the crash and turned around. My business car! Shouted Mr. G. The front ballast car was embedded in the rear platform of the business car. Mr. McCormick went red with embarrassment. Michael, can I have a word with you? Well, Mr. G tore into Mr. McCormick like a dog ripping apart the Sunday morning paper. Now, I can't tell you exactly what he said because he used very, well, colorful language. But he said things like Mr. McCormick shouldn't be allowed to run a railroad, and he wouldn't even allow him to run a model railroad. When they arrived back outside, Sampson had pulled the ballast cars back from the business car. There's a contractor that repairs passenger cars along this branch. We can take it there for you, suggested Harley. Thank you, said Mr. G as he hopped aboard Damion. Mr. McCormick turned to Sampson. He went red again, but instead of embarrassment, he was livid. Out of all the cars in the yard you could have smashed into, you smashed into his. What the hell is wrong with you? I don't know what happened, sir, sighed Sampson. But, no buts, thundered Mr. McCormick. This little incident could have cost us the contract and our railroad's reputation in the process. But I don't want to hear it, Sampson. Get back to work. Now! Sampson, with a tear in his eye, rolled sadly away. He felt dreadfully, thinking he had let Mr. McCormick and his whole railroad down. Later, in the old sightings, Mr. G said good things about us, Harley told Mr. Warnock. Excellent, said Mr. Warnock. Did anybody see you? No, said Damion. Nobody saw us. Good, that's very good, said Mr. Warlock. That contract is as good as ours.
Like that now, the D&D, so we call it Dumb and Dumber. It's John Sabat. It's the NS crew. Yeah, so they stop. Watco takes care of all Phillips 66's other plants. All of them. And we were the only one that Watco didn't do, and